Ninjago is no stranger whatsoever to the concept of losing the people that you love. Many characters within Ninjago have departed in one way or another, but how we've seen characters react to it has certainly been an interesting aspect. You could cite how the ninja reacted when they lost Zane, or when they lost Wu in Season 7. There have been multiple instances where we've seen how characters do take when it does come to these characters no longer being with them. It is certainly an interesting concept, but I do think one has been more interesting over the bunch because of how appropriate it does ultimately feel. And that was actually the loss of Nia from Seabound going into Crystallized. All of the ninja, I do believe, encapsulate a different aspect when it does come to grief. Obviously, more specifically, the 5 stages of grief. I honestly think how they handled it was pretty good, and for Crystallized standards, I honestly do think it's one of the better aspects when it does come to that season. So I wanted to take a look through it today, talk about how our 5 ninja embody the 5 stages of grief, and how Ninjago honestly perfected demonstrating how those aspects do go into grief, and just show ultimately how there was a lot of thought put into this arc, even if afterwards it did go a little bit downhill. So let me not waste any more of your time, and let's talk about how Ninjago perfected grief. Now, if you are not familiar with the 5 stages of grief, it is a model built on how a person typically reacts when they lose someone who is important to them. The 5 stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. All of them having very different reactions, and all of them could take as long as they take, all of them could actually be skipped. It is a really interesting concept, and I do think it's a fairly interesting one to apply to Ninjago. But all 5 of those stages are shown definitively within each of the 5 ninja after that loss of Nia, and is something that I really didn't expect them to tackle, because when you look at it through this lens, you realize that it is a symbolism on how grief is explored. It's really demonstrating how people can react to something even a year on, like Crystallized did confirm. I really like the fact that we get to see how all of the ninja are in different stages of accepting what happened to Nia in that season. It's just really nice and comforting, and honestly, weirdly good when it does come to Ninjago standards because of what the topic is. But let's actually talk about the first stage, denial. This is ultimately what happens when someone just doesn't want to accept the fact that the person is in fact gone. And the ninja that does encapsulate that is Zane. Zane, by all accounts, doesn't want to accept the situation for what it is. Zane doesn't want to acknowledge that he needs to process the feelings after losing Nia. And in reaction, he turns off his emotions, so he just simply hasn't got to deal with it. That is, by definition, denying the fact that it happened. He's denying himself access to the fact that he has got to cope with it. He has to learn how to deal with it. He does show what happens when he turns it off. He just screams out loud, which shows that he hasn't processed it whatsoever. This, like I said, fits perfectly into this concept of denial, and is honestly really interesting to see that Zane, of all people, was never able to get past the first step. At least we do get to see afterwards how he does get around to it, and he understands the importance of emotions, and it is nice to know that he does basically go from denial straight to acceptance. That is really cool, and I do think it's interesting. If it's not a little weird, because Zane has always learned how to deal with his emotions, but that's another rant for another day. But the thing is that regardless of that, I do still think it's very interesting to see how Zane was the person to show us what the first stage actually did look like. It's really interesting, to put it simply, because I just didn't expect it to be Zane. The second stage of grief is anger, and Kai is definitely the person who gets to encapsulate that. Kai didn't really know what to do with himself. He is bitter, he is angry, he is resentful by all accounts. He is teaching children in Crystallized how to basically run through your opponents like they're nothing. He's teaching people basically to not restrain themselves, because that's how he feels. He's having to restrain himself because he wasn't able to save his sister. He is just so angry and aggressive, and it really is palpable in the beginning of Crystallized. This is ultimately the one that does make the most sense. Kai has always been a hot-headed character by nature. As Kai has matured throughout the course of the show, you do realize that it's less of a factor, but the loss of his sister is definitely something that would bring that back. So it does make perfect sense that he is the person that gets to do this emotion. It was actually nearly Lloyd at one point, but interestingly, he does actually embody another aspect a lot better, but more of that in a minute. But as it stands, Kai is the true true and very real representation of it. I like how they really do go into how Kai is just aggressive with it. Of course, people do take some issue with this whole plot, and luckily it was seemingly fixed within Crystallized, but it doesn't seem to be that they actually did want to get away from the fact that Kai was angry, and I do like it for that reason. But that is why he is anger. The third stage of grief is actually going to be bargaining, and interestingly, this is actually going to be encapsulated by Lloyd. Now, you may be wondering why it's going to be him. He's actually been demonstrated to be quite sad, he's also been demonstrated to be quite angry. But the thing is that bargaining makes perfect sense with Lloyd when you realize the context on how he's living his life actually at the point of Crystallized. In Crystallized, Lloyd is a window washer. He is just retired from being a ninja, and he's decided that he's going to live out his life living simply. I wonder if he ever would have washed Vinny's windows. Would he have seen Garmadon through that? But that's a different topic. But anyways, he is bargaining, but in a very untraditional sense. Typically, the stage of bargaining is, I will do this if I can get the person back. But what Lloyd is essentially doing is, he is saying, I will stop being a ninja if it means no one else will be suffering. Lloyd says that he cannot be responsible for people anymore. He cannot be the person who allowed Nia essentially to be in the fate that she did ultimately succumb to. Lloyd believes that it was his fault by all accounts, so he is taking the bargain of, if he doesn't be a ninja, no one else will suffer the same fate. It is a very twisted way of looking at it, but it is by definition bargaining. This is definitely one of the most complex ones of the bunch, and I love that for it. I think it's a very interesting way to take Lloyd's character. Lloyd was very accepting in earlier instances of loss within the show. Think of when they lost Zane, for example. But it's interesting to see that all of it has essentially come to him. It's all become too much, and the loss of Nia was the linchpin that really did make him go from, I could do this, to, no, I can't. I really do like how that feels as well, and it's interesting that he couldn't get past bargaining. Honestly, it could have been argued that he was depression, but the thing is that stage is more than certainly covered by the next person up. Which is of course going to be Jay. Jay is, by all account, the easiest one of the bunch to link back to. Jay was just simply never able to get past the loss. He was never able to realize that he was no longer going to be with Nia. So he abandoned everyone, went to the lighthouse because he thought that would be the closest place to her, and he just lived out his life monotone. He lived out his life with basically no wanting to continue. And I do think that again was fairly interesting to see. To see someone so upbeat, so humorous, so slapstick humor succumb to this after the loss of his yang, I do think is a fairly interesting thing to see, and definitely is one of the reasons why they perfected it. Showing the contrast of a character that's usually so happy to a version that is just broken and has nothing left to go. It's really a good way to demonstrate how loss can affect people. It sends a really decent message that even the best of people can suffer sometimes, and it does promote this idea that you should check in on those people who do smile and laugh a lot, because this could be the outcome. I really do think it's a great way of demonstrating it, and I do like the fact that Jay was the person to do it, because he was definitely the best ninja for that, but of course, it means that he was only one step away from getting to acceptance. But of course, there's only one ninja left to actually be acceptance. So let's talk about Cole. Cole is the ninja that is acceptance by all accounts, which is ironic because he spends his time with Zane, who is at the first stage. But Cole has basically lived to accept this fact. He's lived it's Nia. She's no longer with us, and it's a massive shame. It's not that he's not sad, but he realizes that something needs to be done. He's the reason the ninja tried to get back together for the Vengestone buyer. He's the reason that the ninja were even in the same room to begin with. He's trying to bring the team together and push them forward, which I think is a really good way of doing it. But honestly, Cole was definitely, again, the perfect version of the character to definitely do this, because it would make sense that he would try to do that. With the fact that Lloyd was no longer in the position of wanting to be a ninja, it makes sense that Cole would have taken that leadership role on and actually tried to bring everyone together to do something right. I like the fact that Cole did take that mantle, and it just does feel fitting. It just works within his character scope and definitely does feel the right way to go about it. Cole also does strike me as the person to be able to succumb to acceptance. It does make sense that he would be able to live with it even if he is sad, because he knows that is what Nia will ultimately want. And he knows that there are people who wouldn't be able to deal with it, like the rest of the ninja. It is really interesting to see, and I just really like that for Cole's character. Really subtle characterization that just really does do a lot. But with that, that is the 5 stages of grief and how the ninja represent them. It is, in my opinion, a fantastic and subtle arc that you may not pick up on a first watch, but when you look for it, you realize that they are all doing that theme. I love the fact that they're doing it, and it definitely does feel like a very mature theme, and it does feel like it fits in with the season itself. I like what they did, and I honestly do hope they get to do more of it within the future, because if they continue to perfect concepts like this, I have no doubt we're going to get some good seasons along with it. Just forget the fact that this was in crystallized. But with that out of the way, I would love to know what you guys think. Did you identify this concept when it did come to crystallize? Or have I presented it to you now? What do you think of it? Is there any ninja you think should be in a separate stage? What do you think about other characters? What stage do you believe Wu is in? Personally speaking, I think he also does encapsulate bargaining, but that is just me. You could argue a handful of those ones in my opinion. But regardless of all that, like I said, I would love to know what you think, because I do really like this idea. But thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you enjoyed. And if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people. And if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Each of you, your support means the absolute world to me, and I truly cannot thank you enough. But that's about it for today, and take care. Okay,